Becoming pregnant, being pregnant and having a baby are all very different phases of a mother's life. They require different resources, tools and knowledge, and often in our haste to conceive, we can forget the bigger picture. To help give moms-to-be some of the tools and advice for when it comes to fertility and pregnancy is Charlotte Jean, who is a nutritional therapist, a certified doula and a fertility specialist too. Charlotte's personally experienced how birth can be a beautiful event and not a medical emergency. Welcome, Charlotte. A very interesting discussion, and I think one that needs some light shed upon it.
Definitely. Michael, especially the difference in the phases that we forget.
Right. So those phases would be preparing for pregnancy, conceiving, being pregnant, and obviously birth after that. Why is it that we need to look at these as such different phases in the cycle?
If we look at preconception, something that's so important there is that our health, our shared health as a couple before conception actually determines the health of our baby.
Right.
And that's massively important, because I'm sure any loving parent-to-be doesn't want to hand down bad genes to their children. So we need to have a look at our health in terms of the conception moment, and then preparing ourselves to actually be pregnant as a part of that, because it's not just a physical preparation. Emotions, the spirit is involved, our relationships, and then being pregnant is like running the Comrades Marathon and really knowing that you were going to run it. Yes, and you need to prepare for it, and now you're running it and not being shocked and surprised by the symptoms.
Yeah.
And then having a baby is a different part of that journey. There's a different preparedness for it. So I laugh at the phases and say, you know, we're so consumed with just becoming pregnant. Just please, I want to have a baby, I want to become pregnant. But we forget that there's a whole sort of ecosystem of change that is involved that we need to be aware of and prepare for accordingly.
So what are some of the fundamental things that we need to be considering when preparing to conceive a child, and also into that phase of conception and gestation?
Well, the first thing that's really, really important, and it seems almost too logical, like why wouldn't we think about this, is do both parties want to have a baby?
It's an interesting one, yeah.
And often the pressure's coming from one party only, or the other party feels it's the right time, but they're not ready. It needs to be the right time for both. Another thing that's really important to consider is that your whole life is going to change. This is an irrevocable step that you take. So I always say, look at the triune person. Your body physically needs to be prepared, your emotions, and then also your spirit. There's a lot involved in terms of what you believe, your convictions.
Charlotte, talk to us about some of these sort of ancient thinking around babies and pregnancy, in contrast to the more modern medical and I suppose clinical cycle of pregnancy that we experience today.
Well, an interesting comment was made by one of the forerunners of natural family planning in the UK. And she said that fertility is in the mind. So the ancient mystics, and also, interestingly enough, the Egyptians, who really knew how to space their families and their planning a lot more sort of wisely than we know now. They understood that fertility is really a holistic expression of your identity as a man or a woman.
Right.
So if there are emotional issues, traumas that you've experienced, even your own birth, because we actually can remember our own birth, bad stories that you've heard that are surrounding having children, surrounding being pregnant, having a baby, you build up those barriers so strongly so that you physiologically should be able to conceive and really have a very enjoyable pregnancy and a positive birth outcome. But because emotionally and neurologically you've got those barriers, you're going to have a very, very difficult experience. You may not even be able to conceive.
Right.
So there was a far greater appreciation of all the linkages in a human being that are expressed in terms of having children than there is now. Now there's just a race. We want instant gratification. I want a child now. And also there's a misunderstanding of the healthy years of childbearing and the unhealthy years of
Right,
childbearing.
absolutely.
So I find that we've lost a lot of that really basic essential knowledge that was extremely helpful, very nurturing, and also helped us to value children.
Yes, absolutely.
Don't just think of it as a product. That baby's not a product that you went and spent X amount to get.
Charlotte, what we also need to consider is, while we are pregnant, this life that we're living, which is different from the life pre-pregnancy. What are some of the things we need to be considering there fundamentally in terms of sort of nutrition and exercise? Do we make big shifts, or do we just adapt and adjust what we have been doing? And when it comes to exercise, how intensely should we be doing this through the period of pregnancy?
So if you look at being pregnant, what's really, really important there is to re-engage the body's intuition. Because a woman who's pregnant and who is healthily pregnant, I think you need to put those two concepts together, knows instinctively what foods she needs. She develops very strong cravings.
Right.
And those cravings are indicative of the nutritional needs of her body.
Okay.
It's always recommended that a diet that is higher in raw food is healthier.
Right.
That's good for anyone.
Yes, absolutely.
Unprocessed materials, a lot of exposure to sunlight, healthy movement, so walking, some weight-bearing exercise, but not a great deal. And if she was already in a routine of movement before she became pregnant, she can continue that right until close to her last trimester of pregnancy. Especially things like stretching, Pilates.
Yes.
So those exercises just help to keep the body strong. But what's really important there again is to remember that when you're pregnant, you're not eating for two.
Yes, yeah.
The body's able to take the resources that it needs, but it's a deeply emotional and spiritual process. So we can't separate now, well, let's just be very functional. Just make sure I'm eating all the right foods, I'm taking my priggy vitamins. We actually need to take a step back and become a lot more reflective, spend a lot more time with ourselves, our partner. Hopefully we have a partner who's committed to this baby.
Yes.
And understanding the kind of person we are going to be when this baby comes. So I'd say that being pregnant is far more spiritual and emotional than it is clinical.
Yes.
Or even medical.
Yeah.
Because you have quite a few months to prepare, and you also knew what you were doing.
Yes.
Before you got the status
Yeah.
that you were pregnant. So as much as there are the really healthy tips in terms of eating, we should have been doing those before.
Anyway, Charlotte, thank you so much for joining us today. Really great to chat to you.
A pleasure.